is what it is, which is something we cannot read. It has an incredibly careful and precise form of writing in a script that nobody has any idea what it means or how it works. What is this thing? Where did it come from? Why was it made? The pictures give you some clues and lock you into a vaguely medical, vaguely cosmological context, botanical, obviously, with a lot of plants. But given that none of them quite add up, it's quite hard to know where they take you. And if we're not meant to read something, what could that be? Why? What kind of purpose for a book, which was a significant investment of time and money? I mean, this is not a cheap production. Why would somebody do that and make it illegible? Is it truly something that is meant to be a one-off secret book?
Handwriting analysis by paleographer Michael Gullick at the National Library of Sweden indicated that there was one author. Tests to recreate the calligraphy of a Devil's Bible suggest it would take up to 5 years of non-stop writing to create it.
The Devil's Bible, also known as the Codex Gigas, which is Latin for big book, 165 pounds, 3 feet in height, almost 2 feet across, and almost 1 foot thick. In order to sort of set the scene for this, though, we will also have to talk about Rudolph II, who was the Holy Roman Emperor, and he was also the King of Bohemia and Hungary. He possessed the Codex Gigas, but he also had the Voynich manuscript as well. The Voynich manuscript was produced later than the Codex Gigas. The Codex Gigas appears to be from the 1200s, and the Voynich manuscript is from the early 1400s. However, both did end up in the library of Rudolph II. The Voynich manuscript is composed of a largely indecipherable text. There have been many attempts over the hundreds of years to decrypt it. That gets to the heart of the problem with the Voynich manuscript. Don't think that it is an encrypted text. It is an entirely separate language. The Codex Gigas seems to be infamous for a portrait that appears in there of the devil. And this is a rather unusual depiction because it shows him all alone in a very large room. This is odd because during this time period, typical depictions of the devil would show him with other demons, or they would show him punishing humans in some fashion, and usually hell would be divided into multiple levels, and none of those things appear in this particular case. Opposite of that page, however, is a depiction of heaven, and heaven is actually divided up into different sections. There are missing pages from this. Anywhere from 10 to 12 pages are estimated to be missing. And as intriguing as all that is, before we get into the rest of the historical aspects of this and the investigations that have been done on it later by graphologists and paleographers and all sorts of other experts, we should look back, I think, to Rudolph II himself. He was much more into what are known as the occult sciences, into mysticism, the Hermetic arts, Kabbalah, and Rudolph was really a great exemplar of this entire period where people tried to bring together and synthesize all knowledge that had existed prior to that, which is an odd thing that it has in common with the Codex Gigas itself, because that indeed is what that monk was attempting to do. And that is actually what Rudolph ended up doing on his own later. And this brings me around to the Enlightenment was built on many of the things that were taking place during this Renaissance period. Alchemy led over into chemistry. Astrology led over into astronomy. You can even trace back some of the notions about evolution to the transmutation of species. The idolaters of the Enlightenment have tried to expurgate much of their own history. They don't want to realize that a lot of it was brought about by people like Rudolph II, who, although he was into all of this occult stuff, he was also a patron of the arts and sciences. He brought in all of these artifacts from anywhere that he could get them, sculptures, beautiful works of art, clocks. He brought in clock makers. He brought in astronomers, astrologers as well. A lot of his interest in this was spurred because of an astrological horoscope that had been prepared for him by Nostradamus that predicted, he thought, many things that came to be true in his life later. So with this, he ended up forming his court around these kinds of ideas and these kinds of people. He's also said to have personally engaged in various types of research into alchemy. A lot of these experiments involved mercury. Rudolf, in fact, brought in 2 astronomers to his court who were highly influenced by the Copernican model. Many aspects of modern cosmology were born very much out of this entire environment that was taking place in Rudolf's court. And among the things that they were commonly interested in at this time were notions such as harmony, balance, order, and they also were very interested in producing or attaining various items of supposedly magical power, such as talismans and ancient occult relics. Many of the books at this time were often encoded. They were often transported around under secrecy. These were things that were of the highest levels of importance for both kings and other members in their court. And the Renaissance was really a time, kind of a brief interval for the occult sciences where they could flourish more openly than they had been able to do in the past. Obviously, they still had to operate in secret as much as possible, but once the Enlightenment came along and it expurgated so much of the occult sciences, it ended up driving them underground because of the emphasis on rationalism. And many historians have said that this focus on Enlightenment rationalism, once it was combined with 2 different versions of humanism, both Christian humanism and later secular humanism, it really represented a sort of closing off of so many of these things that we had in the past. And since Rudolf was such a voracious and obsessive collector of different things, he had this sort of polyglot milieu of interests. Because of this, he had all kinds of rumors that came up about him, especially among the Catholics. They said that he was into demonology, that he was possibly even possessed. He began to become more reclusive. In fact, he rarely left the castle. His true love was arts and sciences and their occult variants. And occult does not necessarily mean satanic, it simply means hidden. Many historians say, though, because of the 30 Years' War, the Swedes, they were able to take away an entire treasure trove of all of these exquisitely rare works that he had. Most of this material has never been recovered. He had lots and lots of hermetic materials and occult materials. It was all just a magnificent and ostentatious displays. They say that some of this was influenced from people becoming reconnected with the ancient world, with the Babylonians, with the Chaldeans, and with the Egyptians, and with their various mythologies and legends that surrounded their cultures and societies. Historically, I think that Rudolf II is somewhat of a neglected character. I personally don't recall hearing very much about him when I was in graduate school studying European history. But I do find it very intriguing how it all sort of just comes together with his court. Now, as we transition over from Rudolf II to the Codex Gigas itself, it is made out of vellum, which is what was used at the time. And once they performed the tests on this, they found out that it was indeed from calf skins. Oddly enough, once the National Geographic got together a series of historians and other experts, they were indeed able to confirm it indeed was written by a single person. When they performed writing tests on it, they found that just for the writing portions alone, not the artwork and the illuminated margins and whatnot, would have taken 5 years of around-the-clock writing just to complete that aspect. So once you toss in the painting as well, this expands the time frame to a minimum of 15 years to complete. And mostly the experts said they would be more comfortable with a time frame on the range of 20, 25, or perhaps even 30 years for the production of this text. Now, some of the odd things they found about it is that there are no signs of deterioration in hand-eye coordination or in eyesight over time that you would expect taking place over a 25 or 30-year period.
Handwriting analysis by paleographer Michael Gulick at the National Library of Sweden indicated that there was one author